back.
We're back. How are you doing, Moose?
I'm good. I got off work pretty late today.
Mm-hmm.
Been looking at some money.
Dash money.
I haven't seen it came in yet though.
When's that direct deposit hit?
I know. This is midnight of the 17th already. Direct deposit has not hit yet.
It needs to hurry up.
They're running on volume time. No. So, what's today's night about?
So tonight, we're talking about some of our favorite books and how they had impacts on us, how they were pivotal.
The first time I read 50 Shades of Grey
That was mine too.
changed my life.
I did watch the movie.
Oh, I haven't watched the movie.
I watched the first one, not the unrated version, just the regular version. It was definitely like edgy, but it wasn't anything like too crazy. It's pretty like typical.
I remember there being backlash because it was like it wasn't racy enough. They're like, we wanted more.
Then they came out with the unrated versions. More nipple. If you want to hear a fun fact about it, since we're talking about books, you know that book started out as a fan fiction of Twilight?
The one by Stephanie Meyer.
Yeah. So for those of you who aren't familiar with fan fiction is basically when there's already existing property, let's say Harry Potter, Twilight, The Hunger Games, and fans will go and write their own versions of it. Like, hey, I'd like to see what Katniss does in this scenario, so they'll write it. Or I like, what if Harry Potter, was in this moment and he did this early or something. So they'll come up with these different scenarios and they'll write them and they'll post them to the internet and stuff. And so the author of 50 Shades of Grey was a big fan of Twilight and had written it as a Twilight fan fiction. So basically the same story, but just with Edward and Bella. And it was getting really popular and people liked it, and she wanted to publish it and actually make money, and the publishers said, like, we like what you've written. I mean, you don't own that property though, so if you can just make it in a different world, we will easily sell it. And so she did, and she created her own, obviously she made more changes as it developed, but that's how it started. It was just Twilight fan fiction. So it's a fun fact for you guys.
So which one's Jacob?
Ooh, I don't know. I think she probably shows up in a later book. I have to read that.
It's funny that you say that because I totally forgot that I had done this, but at some point I had written a little, I guess you would, back then that word didn't exist, fan fiction. Maybe it did, but as a 4th or 5th grader I didn't know. But I started writing my own kind of pseudo continuing book for Bridge to Terabithia.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember the only person I really told, or she happened upon my work, it was my music teacher all throughout elementary school. She was one of the coolest people that I've ever met. Her name was Miss Young Walker. She's like, what is that? I'm like, oh, it's something I'm writing. She's like, is it a book? I'm like, yeah. And so I had just become really fascinated with the Bridge to Terabithia book. So I was talking about this rad music teacher and how she had piercings. That's the most memorable thing I remember. She had piercings on both ears, 10 on one side and 11 on the other to make up the number 21. And she had asked me about a notebook I had, and she's like, oh, what are you doing? Is this a book you're writing? I'm like, it is actually. And it was kind of like the sequel to Bridge to Terabithia, because at the time the movie was coming out. I was in 4th or 5th grade. They were coming out with the movie, and I remember having checked out that book at the library, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to read the book so that I already know what happens in the movie. I think that was a thing back then. I don't know if it's a thing now, but it's let me read this book before I go and watch the movie.
I did that a few times.
I know for Twilight, that was a huge so after I had read Bridge to Terabithia, I was really sad. The ending's really bad. The girl dies. Like, she just,
Spoiler alert.
spoiled, she just dies. Really tragic way too. She falls off the road and just like dies in a creek kind of thing. And I remember I was like, what do you mean this is the end? Like, this ending? This is a shitty ending for a kid's book, you know? So I remember I was like, no, like, it can't be. Like, so my sequel was like Bridge to Terabithia 2, going back in time to save Leslie, like something like that. And so it's probably thrown away. I don't know what happened ever to that writing, but I remember writing a sequel to it. And but now you would call it fan fiction. And I did write where like Jessie went back in time to save her, and she came out back alive. There wasn't, but then also there was kind of like some effects having been through the past and coming back in the present. So, but yeah, I remember wanting to change the ending because it just wasn't nice at all or suited for children, you know. But then I was like, that's life. People sometimes do crack their necks on a creek, and
It's so morbid.
but yeah, that's one of the first books where I was like, no, it can't be that. Like, I refused to accept that for a bit. I was like, nope,
This is not how this ends.
this is not how this ends, and I'll make sure of it. But that's pretty interesting that you brought up how 50 Shades is like kind of a riff off of Twilight, I guess. Maybe I can make one.
Mm-hmm. Fun fact, this is still talking about fan fiction. A couple years ago, Kindle, and Kindle's such like a big e-commerce for books, and you can actually self-publish and everything on there. Like 7 years ago, Kindle actually put out a service called Kindle Worlds, where it was actually fan fiction, but you get paid for it. Like Kindle obtained the licensing rights to like a lot of properties, like Pretty Little Liars, Gossip Girl, a ton of other series, Veronica Mars, like even to TV shows and stuff. I think they were Supernatural too, and they had basically said like, yeah, you can write, you'll submit it, we can help you make cover art and everything, and you'll get a sale portion. And so I actually did do it. I wrote 2 books for it. I did a reboot of the Gossip Girl series, and
What happened?
so it starts off kind of similar. It was like a blend of like the original books and the TV show. Basically, Serena, like the main girl, Blake Lively, for those of you who don't know, she moves back into town and no one likes her because she just disappeared for a year, and she. I'm thinking about it now.
Read the book.
Read the book. Fun fact: it's not on sale anymore because Kindle took the whole thing down. Maybe like 2 years ago, because I was checking on like I wonder if anything got put more, and I looked at it. I said we're shutting down the platform, so they only ran it for like 5 years. But basically, the whole book was about Serena moves back, and all her rich friends don't like her anymore, so she goes with Dan, aka Lonely Boy, and they make this really cool school project. They make a short film, and then everyone like falls in love with Serena again. That's basically the whole premise. But if you want the link, I'll share it to you. You can still read it.
How much money did you make off of there?
I made max, like I think overall the sales, I think I only got like $15 max. But I think had I written more, like I kept at it, I think I could have made it more lucrative. Like, because I wrote the first book in like 2 weeks. I stormed through it really fast. And then it took me like 2 years to put out the second one because I could not think of what to do. And so I put that out. By the time I started writing the third one, I just couldn't really get anywhere with it, and I just kind of let it be. I was like, no, I should try to finish it. And then I looked into it, and they shut the program down. And they're like, oh, we're going to take your books off after a year. So the program's gone, and you can't read my books anymore. But if you want to, guys, I'll send you the link. But yeah, I only made like $15.
If I were to, I guess all my reports, like even in high school, had to be a riff off of. There's one main story that like I love, and mainly what I write about is kind of like almost have tales of that, and it would be Snow White. I love the concept of it. I don't know why. I'm just like something innate to me, and like everything, like Princess has always been my thing. Like that's my characters, especially Snow White. But yeah, I think Snow White is the one. I remember one English project I had to write an essay, like a short story, and it was fiction, and I used Snow White more in modern times. I think I made her dad like a business owner, and her mom, the way she killed her Snow White's father, quote unquote, and her almost killed Snow White was by like cutting the ties off the brakes so she would get into an accident. You know, that's like
I'm
she did it
liking
for
this.
insurance policy purposes.
It's
like,
so modern and
yeah.
edgy.
I don't know. I remember that. No, but one of the first kind of books that even got me to learning how to read would have to be those Scholastic school books. I don't know if you remember back in the day those ads, the Scholastic books and stuff. I remember spending like $100 at like the book fair, because when they had like everything spread out, it just was so enticing and so let me take this home. Can I get this? You know. And I think my mom ordered 2 books from there for me, and one of them was called Dear Tooth Fairy. That one I read non-stop, like 8 times a day. Verbatim everything. It was by Jane O'Connor. There's different variations of a Dear Tooth Fairy book, but the one I'm talking about is Scholastic, and it's by Jane O'Connor. And then the second one was the class picture day, and it was about basically this class where in cahoots were like sticking out their tongues in class one day, and just how the day went. But yeah, I remember those 2 books were very memorable for me.
Yeah, I totally do remember the book fair. I think I only bought like one thing once because I grew up very poor.
No, I did too. I remember bringing $50 one day, and funny story. I brought 50 because never in my life had I ever bought anything from the book fair, and I begged my mom, please, 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 can I get something? She's like, okay. She gives this 3rd grader a $50 bill.
Where did you steal this from?
That's exactly what the librarians thought. And it's funny because they saw me looking around, and they were like, oh, Lewis, you got a hole burning in your pocket, huh? Like you want to spend, and I'm I do. And so finally, when I got the items I wanted, I went to go pay with them, and they seen that I whipped out a 50. This little Mexican brown girl whipped out a 50. They're like, where did you get? They almost look like I stole it or something, and I'm like, no, that's all I have. I don't have anything smaller. Sorry.
That's all I have.
And they're like, oh. But it's funny because, all jokes aside, they thought like they were just like kind of joking around with me. Oh, she's got a hole burning through her pocket, and stuff. And at the time, I didn't know that was like a figurative
Mm-hmm.
language of speech, you know. And later on, I was like, no, that means like, oh, you have like money to spend, you know. And yeah, I whipped out that 50, and they're like, fuck, we didn't know we were like that.
We were kidding.
We were kidding. But no, then I purchased it, and then my mom got mad. You spent the whole 50.
I told you bring back change.
Yeah, exactly. I think I bought like a Smental highlighter. Not even a book.
You spent the money on that?
Now you see that shit at the Dollar Tree, like.
Exactly.
Well, go on. What were you saying?
No. I mean, I always liked the book fair because because they would put it when I was in school, like in the library and stuff, and they would kind of alter. The whole library looked different, and I always thought it was so exciting because it's like it's a different environment. It's like cool. Like there's all these bright, colorful things to buy, and like, but I never had money. My mom always just said, no, there's no money to buy anything. So I would always look around and like, what's this book, or what's this cool little build your own like thing here, or here's a craft, or there's always cool little things, and I always admired it from afar and just window shopping, but I never could get anything. But it's very nostalgic to talk about it because I remember this, and I remember the feel of it, and just like getting to like even just to go look and like, oh, there's this book, or they talked about this, and I do remember like there's a little paper they would bring you, like there's also this, you could order it online. Sometimes they'd bring it home, like, do you think maybe we can get this? It's like, I'll see, and that meant no.
They just hope you forget.
Exactly. Like they'll forget about it. They won't remind me. It's like I never forgot.
The one thing I do remember about that particular library in my elementary school were these zoo books. Like zoo. I don't know if you remember. They would have like the
commercial.
Yeah. The commercials for it. What were they called? Zoo.
They were zoo books. Yeah.
Zoo books. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they're called zoo books.
They just had wildlife on them, each page and stuff, and we just look at the pictures and stuff. But no, yeah, the book fair was a big thing for me when I was smaller. And then later on, it turned into books that you were forced to read in English. Like, I can think of at least 5 off the top of my head you were forced to read. I think in 5th grade, that's when I started having these quizzes and shit.
Oh, yeah.
But Chronicles of Narnia was something that we had to read in 5th grade. And then I think it was like The Giver too, also. Like skimmed through it. And then when I got to 6th grade, that's when I was like, okay, you really have to read this. But The Giver.
Serious.
Yeah, The Giver was a book where I was just waiting for. This was back in 2008, and I was waiting for the movie already. And I don't think the movie came out until like probably 2010, 2011, or later. No, not even like 14 maybe. But it came out later on in time, but I was really anticipating that movie because it was like I'm really into dystopia books or short stories, and that one was one where it was like, yeah, I can't wait for that movie. I can't wait for that to be a movie. I don't know if you've read a book and you're like, can't wait for that movie.
Oh yeah, I did just read a book too where like I read like maybe like 2 months ago, and just going through it, it's like it has to be a movie. They have to make it to a movie. They have to.
Which one was it?
It was called, I think I wrote it down, The Music of What Happens. And what happened? I think we were all at Barnes and Nobles one day, and we're skimming the books like we do. We look around.
Mm-hmm.
We first check out the Tasteful Nudes.
Mm-hmm.
Look through
Always.
those. All the sexy books.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we got bored with those, I yandered over somewhere else. But it was in the young adult section, and I checked it out, and I just looked at the cover of it, like, it was very animated, and I liked the way it looked, and it was just, I read like the first chapter, I sat there and read it. And was like, I was hooked, and I'm like, I went and I borrowed it from the library because I didn't have the money to buy it, and it was just so like cinematic to me, and it's very akin to like kind of like To All the Boys I Loved Before, kind of like in that. It's very kind of like lighthearted in that, but there's like a really serious. I won't spoil it for it. It just came out like 2019, so just a year ago. It's like there's a big like issue that happens with one of the characters, and it's like you go on the journey with them, and kind of like how they handle it and go about it. But it's like it's really good, and the whole premise is these two guys working on a food truck because one of the main characters like is about to lose their house because they don't have any of the money to pay their mortgage. Like they're late 6 months and they're gonna lose everything. So they're working on this food truck and they have no idea what they're doing, and it's just me. I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's really good. There's a lot of twists and turns, and I liked it. So I in my head I was like, there has to be a movie. There has to be a movie. In my head I'm like doing casting, and like I would picture this person and this should be the mom and all this stuff. And fun fact, the whole book takes place in Phoenix, so like not too far.
Funny thing, I would say I'm the same. Like the same thing happens vice versa, where it's like I see a good show and then I hear it gets canceled. I'm like, what?
Right.
I'm like, what do you mean? I was waiting for the second season. I was so hyped up. There was 2 shows in particular that I remember. One was like 9 Lives of Chloe King. I was into that one. And then the other one was Pitched, which was about, it followed like kind of the first girl Major League Baseball player. And there was never a second season, which I was really bummed out about. Bring it back. Just like Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Come on, make it happen.
Yeah. One show that got canceled that I really like is Sabrina.
All the teenage witch.
Yeah, like the new reboot on Netflix, they just canceled it.
Oh.
And they were finally going to do the Riverdale crossover in season 5, and they didn't.
Oh.
It was finally going to happen. But now the creator said, oh, we'll just do it in the comic books. Because fun fact, the version that's on Netflix now is based off of a comic book version called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. And so that's where they're like, oh, we should do the edgy, dark reboot. And I like the show, and I like the original comic, but I'm sad it ended.
I've had scary dreams about that, like the show.
Oh yeah, it's really dark.
It's dark.
A lot of Satanism, all types. It's like sprinkle some holy water as I watch it.
That's a good show. When I was small, I used to watch it just on ABC and stuff. And
oh yeah, the very lighthearted. I love that show. I always watch it.
I always thought, I was like, if I have a dog, I'd name him Harvey.
That's a good name. I really like that for a dog, actually.
Another good author that I like is Kurt Vonnegut. He's the one that wrote Slaughterhouse-Five, and I'm more familiar with his short stories. I haven't read too much into his novels, but his short stories I am into. A little bit about him. He was born in the U.S. back in what year was it? In 22. He lived through World War II, so he actually served into the army. He dropped out of Cornell University.
What?
He's an American writer. He dropped out of Cornell University to enlist in the army.
Badass.
And he survived a really bad bombing there in Germany. It was Dresden. And he said, I remember one of the interviews he had given, he had said that when he stepped out of kind of like the bunker in the safe zone where they were at, the soldiers, they came out and saw just the world was like there was nothing left, like really no civilization. It was just all in pieces, like everything was burnt around them. Like, just imagine just burning shrub everywhere and nothing really, like, no ants or nothing, no living matter around them really. That almost like gave way to inspire him to keep writing these dystopian books. One of the most recent ones I read through an audiobook was it's the title of it is TBR02B, and it's it means to be or not to be, and that's the line you call for in this book. When you read this short story, it's the line you call for assisted suicide. So the point of the story is about it's kind of like it puts you in this world where aging is cured, and so no one ages out. People grow old, like the years grow like add on, but aging is technically cured. And so now the only way to bring people into the world, like babies are hardly born and people hardly die unless it's an accident, but if there were babies to be born, you would have to kind of replace it with another life. So an older person has to die in order to give way for a new life to come. And in the story, it's this guy, he's painting a mural on a wall in a hospital hallway, and it's about like these elaborate doctors and stuff that have done really good things for the community. You know, they've cured aging, they've done a lot of great things for the government. And so he's like painting this mural, and outside of the waiting room he sees like a dad. He's like about to be a father for triplets, but he's just learned the news. It's like only the grandpa can die. His father can die. He's like, all right, I'll die. I'll take one for the team so that like one of the kids could at least be born. And the other two, like people who were planned to die, like I guess had fallen short, you know, so they dropped the ball, so meaning they had to find another two to die before like the other two could be born. And it's kind of like fighting this dilemma, and if not, other kids would have to die. And but yeah, it's just a lot of those dystopia books were because of how he like just he got out of World War II in a really fucked up situation. Just imagine the world just in pieces, and like he just came back from war. And I think that's what inspires a lot of writers too. A lot of their own hardships and stuff have really given way and paved the way for the reasons they write or the work that they do. They've really inspired their work, their hardships and stuff. And they're like, this is why I write. And it kind of, you get some of that when you read certain books and certain writings of particular authors.
Mm-hmm. No, you really do, and like you see it all the time, whether it's from like, TV shows or movies or from testimonies of authors themselves. It's like the advice is like, oh, how do you write? It's like, well, you start with writing what you know, and it filters through those experiences. And people, you know, you see like the sort of the twist and the spin they put on it. Like the guy saw this devastation of like war and the modernization of society. It's like, here's what inspired his crazy stories, because he was witnessing some insane things you thought you'd never see, but here they were.
Yeah, most of his work is postmodernism, like about that, and there's a lot of satire and humor to it too. Because like imagine that, like it's like normal, like in the book and in the story as you read, it's very normalized the way they're speaking. Like, oh yeah, okay, just call the hotline, you know, like, you know, that's to die. That's the hotline. That's the suicide hotline to die. You know, it's very normalized, and but it's really interesting how creative writing could be. Like that, you always hear that cliche saying where it's like, "Oh, the pen's mightier than the sword." So if you really want to get something out there, use the pen. Don't use the sword necessarily. Like the physicality of things. You know, write it down.
Mm-hmm. because words, they do have strong impact. Like you look at literature that's still being studied 100 years later, 50 years later. You know, look at the Bible. That thing's written 2,000 years ago. People are still.
Rosetta Stone.
The Rosetta Stone, exactly. There's all these written things that just didn't fade away. Like they had an impact, and people still try to unravel them and figure out like what did they mean by this, and it's like a bookmarker in time. Like, oh, we got to see what life was like during this moment because you have a written account of someone living in it, like through this story.
One day that'll be Twitter.
Exactly. Oh God, I hope not.
Yeah, back then they had something called canceling and cancel culture.
Exactly, and they used this thing called Twitter.
And if you said one wrong thing on there, boy, your life was over.
Dave Chappelle has a really funny joke. I don't know if you saw it in one of his specials, but he's like, in the beginning, he's like, I'm not really good at impressions, but I'm gonna do it. He's like, if you say one wrong thing ever, and if you said anything in your past, and I find out, I'm gonna cancel you, and no one's gonna ever like you ever again. I'm gonna make sure your life is ruined. And he goes, do you know who that is? And the audience like, that's you. And he points to them.
Yeah.
Because it's so true. That is the audience. That's you guys. Don't forget that.
It's really, when you turn the tables, because when we read something, we all want to relate to it and resonate with it. And when we feel attacked, we're like, nah, let me fight this and let me get at this and stuff. And it could be purely just, they could be having a hard day and it could just be projecting that. But then sometimes they do have a good point that it's like, they do shed some light on the situation. You're like, oh, okay, that's a side I didn't see.
Because it's like, I think everyone just, a big consensus now is criticism equals hate. It's like, no, criticism is there for a reason. And there really can be constructive criticism, and whether it's from fans or from friends or family, like there's a reason something's being said. Sometimes people are jerks and they say things that are way off, but then there's something that needs to be filtered in. It's like, all right, you're responding and telling me this. Let me take that in. And what could I adjust with it?
When it comes to storybooks, what are some storybooks that like you read when you were small or were read to you?
When I was younger, we had this big Disney book, like purple, and had a bunch of like abridged like Disney stories and stuff, and our mom would read that to us sometimes. But then she would like make up her own versions, and there'd be a lot of swear words in it, and that'd be way funnier. And I was like, look at her. She's looking like a fucking bitch right now. She's mad because they invited her to the tea party. I'm like, I see, that is what happened, isn't it? So I like those versions a lot better.
I like those versions too.
But I do remember that. Like, she reads the stories, and then every once in a while she's like, do you want to hear the funny version? I'm like, yeah. So we just had those. I remember I didn't have like a ton of storybooks necessarily around the house. I didn't read. I had that one when I was like 7, and then mostly I consumed books mostly from school. Like I got it from school, and that's where I got it. But I remember there's this one book in particular. I think I was like in the 3rd grade when I first read it. It was like a little like picture book and stuff. And it was called, I wrote it down. Let me see. It is called Comet's 9 Lives. And it's this like picture book about a cat who's kind of always mischievous and kind of ends up like running up its lives, and like, oh, it got hurt trying to get this fish in the ocean, like, oh, it fell down a chimney today, and all this stuff. And it was basically running out of time, like you've used up a lot of lives already. And then the book basically ends where the cat meets like another cat, and they're like, oh, you're friendly, and they were companions, and they, look for food together. And Common was like, oh, I'm gonna spend the rest of my last life with you and enjoy your company. And I thought it was so sweet, and it was just so heartwarming. I really loved it, and I think I read the book like 2 or 3 times. It was so good. But when I got into the 4th grade, I read at a really high reading level. So when I was like in the 4th grade, I read like an 8th grader. They told me that you have to read more challenging books, like you're testing too high. And so I went to go check it out, and they wouldn't let me check it out. Mind your business. They told you, no, your card level says this. You have to read these books and up. This is below you. And I'm like, and I got mad. Like, in my head, I'm like, I know you want me to read these level books, but I want to read this one for fun. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, I just didn't try to fight it because I'm like, whatever. So I got a harder book or something.
Yeah, I remember that little test thing, that test book. When you were talking about, my mom read me these books and I liked her version better where there was cuss words.
Yeah.
It reminded me of, today I saw I started watching this show, and it's a Lifetime show, but sometimes they'll put full episodes on YouTube. They'll upload it on there, and it was like Born Behind Bars or something like that. It was a show on Lifetime, and it's basically following these women in prison who are part of this program, I believe in either Indiana or Illinois, one of those 2 states. But basically, it's women who are pregnant and incarcerated at the same time. And this program is a very strict program and allows the mother to keep their child, I think, for like 3 years tops, or as long as they're on good behavior there, while they're like for their sentencing, in the meantime while they get out. And you see all of these infants with their moms and stuff, and
in prison?
Yes, in prison. And there's like it's a program you have to be accepted in, so you basically have to be on good behavior and meet other criteria, because they do deny other pregnant people on there. And they basically have like certain rooms like for like daycare playrooms for them, but you have to, the rules state there, they run a really tight ship where it's like you're the only one in charge of your kid, like no one else. The mother's responsible. You have to have your room clean. You can't have anything in the crib when they're doing count for like because even the babies do count, like they do.
They find something. What's this, baby?
This? Yeah, no, they'll write them up or if there's no yelling or anything there, because they even said on there that safety comes number 1. Like before anything, like safety is number 1. So they don't tolerate anything else, no yelling or anything else. You're fucking out of there, because like number 1 is the safety of the kids and everyone else over anyone that flips out. And there was this one scene where this mom, she was an ex I think meth addict, and she had gotten in trouble with the law, and this was like her 3rd or 4th kid, and she was reading to her baby the Bible, but I think it was more for herself, but reading it out loud when her kid was there and stuff. And he was probably like a 3 or 4 month old, and she was reading the Bible and stuff, and it was like some really good words. And then it cut to this other mom who was also an ex-meth addict, and she's holding her baby. She's holding up a copy of the Heroin Diaries. And I was like, wow, like, that's just it's very interesting to see how diverse, like, people are and stuff. And it's not to say, like, one thing's better than the other. Like, no, it's more like everyone has different tastes. So it's pretty interesting. I just thought it was like, I was like, whoa.
Reading the Bible and then the Heroin Diaries. I'm like, that's quite a broad spectrum of book
Yeah.
readers.
But if it helps her vent through something, hey, that's her outlet, you know?
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
I had no idea there was such a program. I'm gonna have to read.
It's 1 out of the 8 in the country.
Also, there's not a lot of places that do it.
No, there's not.
What's one of your favorite books?
Favorite books?
Like top ones, like you can go back to. And like I could read this forever.
I would say it's cliche, but one is To Kill a Mockingbird, but also The Little Prince. I really like The Little Prince. It really has. I don't know if you guys seen the Netflix special for it, or like the cartoon animation.
I haven't got to. I've seen like bits, but I haven't gotten to sit through it all.
That one's really good. I think Jeff Bridges is a character in there, and it's just a really good book. It reminds me of how, like, being a kid is, it's okay to not know everything and kind of be naive of things, because sometimes that's like your security. Sometimes being naive in certain situations saves you from a lot.
So what kind of impact did it have for you then? Like, so you took that lesson away.
Yeah.
Was like,
It has. So, the basis of the story for The Little Prince, it's like this guy, his plane crashes in a desert, and this little boy, comes up out of nowhere, and he's like, hey sir, I need some help, like, can you draw me a sheep? And he's like, wait, let me remember the whole part. And he's like, yeah. And then he's like, no, that's not what I meant. That's not the sheep I need. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, that's not the sheep. And so he draws him another one. Nope, that's not it. He's like, what do you mean that's not it? Like, I've been drawing you sheeps, like, which one is it? And then, like, the adult guy who gets the aviator who's stuck in the Sahara is just very frustrated. He's just like, fine, here you go, like, one of the last drawings. And he's like, that's exactly what I wanted. And it's literally just a box with 3 holes in it. And that's what the adult had given, the Little Prince. And the Little Prince is like, that's exactly what I needed. And, because he's like, there, the sheep's inside in there. And he's like, that's exactly what I wanted. And so I think the little boy, in a sense, was asking for, like, creativity or some kind of imagination piece. Because when we're adults, we get so caught up into this kind of day-to-day life and quote-unquote normal or adult things and adult ways to think. And this little kid was not asking for that. He was asking for everything but that. So kind of be free and be imaginative. And then, yeah, it just opened up, like, it made me think about that. It made me think, like, life's not just business. Just have fun with it.
I really like that. I do. I'm gonna read that now and watch the show.
It's really short. I got the little book where it has, like, big letters, like jumbo letters, so it looks like you're reading, like, a really easy book. What about Disney books?
Disney books.
Or Disney stories, like folk tales?
I mean, the only Disney book I had was like that one I talked about as a kid that was like a big, like, it was a thick book. It had like volumes of like the abridged stories and like Snow White and all that stuff. And I'm trying to think if there are any particular ones like stood out to me, like sort of like the more like folklore ones. I don't know, like to be honest, and this is gonna be controversial for some people, I wasn't like a Disney kid in that sense. Where like I always watched Little Mermaid. I always had to watch Toy Story, like Snow White. Like that wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching Power Rangers
Heck yeah.
and Adult Swim. Every guy like at 7 years old. That's what I was doing. But
King of the Hill.
King of the Hill. But no, I enjoyed them. I never, and it's just particular to my upbringing experience where I never like got exposed to it. Also, my mom didn't read that book to us for a super long time either. Like in reality, it was like maybe like a month period max where she actually sat and read the stories.
It was when we could do those reading long things.
Oh yeah. An anecdote, and we'll get back on track, is we had this thing when I went to school. They had a program where if you read so many hours worth of
Wait,
books,
was it the free bike?
it wasn't free bike. What it was free tickets to Six Flags. And so if you logged so many hours worth and you turned it in at the end of the year, you would get, okay, here's a free ticket to Six Flags. And every year we would just lie and write down a bunch of stuff
Every kid did.
to scam our way. And every year we did it. And you know how many times I went to Six Flags? None.
But you guys got the ticket?
We got the tickets every year. We never went.
We did?
We never went. We did. We always got the tickets. I remember seeing them like just sitting in the house, like, oh, we're gonna put them in the drawer here. We'd always gotten them, but we never went.
I feel so sad now.
For those of you who can't hear, my brother surprised, like, we never went. I'm like, no, we never went. We always did get them. I remember my mom showing me, here they are. They're gonna be right here. Like they were physically in our hands. But
our older brother took us eventually.
We did go to Six Flags one time, but only because our oldest brother took us there one time when we were 8. And that was it. We never used our free tickets. I think it's because it's like our ticket was free. Our family had to pay for all of theirs still. So it was like pricey, and there's a lot of us, and that's why it never worked out.
Same with me. I have a lot of book readers kind of gift certificates for a personalized Pizza Hut pizza.
I remember those,
and
yeah.
They're in the cabinet. I'm gonna turn them in. I'm gonna Peter Piper Pizza, watch out. I also have a few personal pizzas too. But yeah, my mom never took me. They're just there collecting dust.
Come on, Rose.
I can get my Happy Meal from Burger King too for being a good student.
Exactly.
I need to get that going.
They're all just sitting here in a spot waiting to be redeemed.
Dairy Queen, I'm coming for you. Get my free Blizzard.
And they're gonna flip it too and everything.
Janet one time, she won movie. We did go. This is when we went to school in Salinas on Lincoln. And I had to wear those uniforms.
Oh yeah, those uniforms.
She won movie tickets to go see Santa Claus movie with Tim Allen.
Oh yeah.
By hula hooping. It was like a hula hoop contest, and she won the hula hoop contest. And you know what she did? She hula hooped around her neck.
You cheater, Janet. All these other kids struggling, trying really hard. Janet's like, nope, I know how to.
Like, I know how to
do this. I mean, it didn't say she couldn't.
She won. She won that contest. I went to go see that movie. It was pretty good.
Fun fact, and we'll get right back on track, but there's one more anecdote. I don't know what it was. I believe it was around Christmas time because it was cold. There was like this weird little like
a kiddie land thing?
Like a kid land, like a kid play area. It was almost like it looked like a mini town, kinda. There was a place you can cut your hair. There was like a nice playground.
And they had opening.
It just opened up. It was the grand opening, and our parents had taken us there to go play and stuff and like hang out. And they were doing like raffles and stuff. And we entered, and one of us won it somehow.
It was you.
It was me. Oh, I guess it was me. Who there were movie tickets to go see Monsters Inc. early. So like I don't know, like a weekend or two before it came out, they're like, we got premiere tickets for you guys to go watch them. And I had won the raffle, and I was like, oh, cool, awesome. And so the day of the event finally came, and naturally, we stopped at the dollar store first to get snacks because our mom didn't want us to pay for them full price.
Right.
We wore a big jacket. We were stuffing our pockets with them, a couple Snickers. Like, okay, here, put it here. Okay, good. Gummies. Like, we were just hiding stuff. I bought a cool little watch with gum inside it.
Ooh.
So we were getting ready for snacks. And so it came time to go watch it. We were running a little bit late, but like, okay, you should be fine though. You should still catch it. And they couldn't find it.
The ticket?
No, the theater. They had no idea where it was at. And this is before like widespread GPS too.
Right, we had that giant map.
And so is it this one maybe? We know there's a theater over here. They're like, no, that's not it. And so they did just not know how to find it. They had no clue, and they just gave up. And we went home.
Cried that day.
Because we had
No MapQuest?
no, we didn't have internet. I didn't get internet until 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't get it till 2015 or 16.
It was the end of my sophomore year. I clearly remember that day too.
My mom refused.
As did my mom. I remember it's like, you'll get internet when we need you to do homework or something, or like, I'm doing it now. Where's the computer now? And finally, it was the end of my sophomore year. If I wanted to use the internet or anything, I had to go to the public library. I spent a lot of time there. But yeah, the whole point was like, I won these movie tickets and they couldn't find it. They're like, no, just sorry. No, we went home and I had my candy sad.
Just at your home, that's where you had your snacks.
But yeah, that's happened. But to get back on topics, but for you, Luce, was there like particular like Disney books or like folk tales from Disney that like, oh, you always revisited this or you loved or like you found significant?
Cinderella. There's a few that I haven't seen, and people are gonna be shocked. But like Pinocchio, or Dumbo, I haven't watched. Pinocchio, I haven't watched. Like, or read the books. You know, there's certain books that I'm not too. That I don't know much about. Like, it's just like, oh yeah, it's Disney. I know of it. I've never picked up the book or anything. Like I know people personally who can sing every song to certain movies and.
Ashley Taylor.
The Taylors. Every Disney movie, Moana, you name it, they can just like sing it off and I'm like, I don't know that song. Shiny? What? But no. Janet had one time. It was not a weird book. It was pretty insightful. Do you know those Living the Faith books that we get from Mr. Mike? Those small ones? Okay. It was almost similar to that. I remember we had gone to a birthday party across the street from our house. I live right across the street from a park. And it was someone that we knew. Family friend. This was many, many years back. Probably 15 years ago. And there was a clown at this party.
Oh no.
Yes, there was a clown. And very friendly. He was very entertaining too. And he just talked to us like normal. He was an older guy. And I wasn't creeped out by it. None of us were.
Like you guys, oh, this is entertaining. It's fun, yeah.
And he really talked to me and Janet. I think because we were more of the older ones around that he talked to us. And he talked to Janet a lot, and he was like, here, this is funny, this book. And it was almost like those Living the Faith ones, where it was about God and stuff, and I never saw that clown again.
It was Jesus, you guys.
It was Jesus.
In the form of a clown.
Janet can testify to that.
I just...
I can't make it up. Like, that's
But that's just so ridiculous that like, not like ridiculous like, but I just think it's something that
It was a
A
clown.
kid's clown at like a party was entertaining. He's like, oh, by the way, here's a book about Jesus.
Like a Mexican party too. Like just a real Hispanic.
Is it because there's more kegs than kids around? Is that why you're concerned about our souls?
Probably, that's why. And yeah, he just like, here you go. And I remember this book was like blue, and I just wish I had I can picture it in my head what it looked like.
Was it? It wasn't one of those like little comic books you find
No,
No,
no.
it wasn't those ones.
Mm-mm.
You guys
Not
know which
those
ones I'm talking
cheesy-
about.
Not
Mhm.
those cheesy, what is it? What's the publication?
I'm not sure.
It's an off-public publication. It's like the CH chip publication, something like that. But where it's like remotely biased on it? No, it's not one of those. It was a. But yeah, it was pretty. That's something I won't forget. Like that was a book handed and given. But as far as books, like unless someone recommends it to me, because I'm gonna be honest, I hate to read. I hate to read. Even in school, I hated to read. But there's a caveat to that. Unless someone says this is a really good book. This one, like it's really good. You have to read it. Like I guarantee you have to read it. And sure, like once I'm forced to read something, then I'll be like, okay. And it's not necessarily forced, but it's like when someone highly suggests something, I'm like, okay, I need to read it. And then I make it a point to prioritize some time to fit that in and stuff. What about you?
Like,
Like reading in general. You had a high reading score.
oh, I really liked reading, and I think that's why like I tested really high as a kid. Like they would tell me, oh, you're in the 3rd grade and you're at the 7th grade level reading. I'm like, okay, cool. Can I just read the book about cats?
For fun.
Like I didn't really care about being smart. I'll tell you right now, I was in high school and I took all my AP classes and I failed every one of them because I just did not care.
I would have too.
But that's a story for another day. But I do love reading though, and the funny thing for me is like I get wrapped into a story. I remember sitting in my room for 5 hours just getting through the Hunger Games, like, and then what happens, and then what happens, and then what happens, and always my thing is towards when I'm reading a book, I get impatient because I want to almost skip to the end, like I want to know what happens, I want to know, and
Yeah.
so I love that experience. Like it's a fun anxiety.
Yeah.
I would say I'm there. I'm almost there. It's an accomplishment because it's like I've gone through this journey with these characters and it's like my own testament. Like I got to finish another book, and so I always enjoyed it. And
It's not like the Pretty Little Liars series where it's just like takes you. There's never an end. There's some books where it's like you're like literally 2 pages till the end, and you're like, I still don't know what the hell's going on.
I never got into Pretty Little Liars. I tried to, but I never did. The one books that I really loved were Gossip Girl. Because I even said earlier, like I wrote fan fiction and published it on Kindle for it. I have most of the books, like first editions. Not all of them. I'm only missing like 3. But I love those books, and but I to get back to the question, I do love reading because it's just it's inspiring. Also, I love reading because like I love writing. I love to write my own stories, and it's just it gives me more perspective and influence, and I get to see what kind of how each author takes their own take. Like, oh, they write, this is the voice they use, and the tone they're putting here, and here's how they structure something, and how they put that journey. I'm like, dang, it's so ingenious and brilliant how they come up with this stuff sometimes. And I'm like, I want to emulate that more. And for like all my high school years, I try to copy F. Scott Fitzgerald and try to be like the Great Gatsby. I love The Great Gatsby. It used to be my number one book. I read it. Well, no, I didn't read it. I was in AP English my junior year. I had a really cool teacher. She's really great. She's still there teaching, and she put the movie for us. This was in 2011. She played us a 1970s version with Mia Farrow and Robert Redford. Because she said, I don't have enough time to read the book class. It'll take too long. So we're just going to play the movie. And then we spend like 4 or 5 days watching the movie, and she's like, you know what? In retrospect, it might have actually been faster to read the book. But I loved it. I fell in love with it. And then I read the book, and I loved it too. But then the 2013 movie came, and I loved that even more. I tried emulating that book so much. I wrote it. I remember in my freshman year of college, I was in English, and it was a particular class. Like, I wrote almost anything I wanted to, kind of. It was a weird structure, but I liked it. And I remember, like, the first paper we wrote was like, just kind of tell me about yourself almost. And I told him, like, I want to be a writer, and one of my biggest inspirations is The Great Gatsby. And I remember I got like an A on it, but he wrote a comment on the paper. It was like, why is that inspirational? It's kind of a tragedy at the end. I didn't clarify that it's inspiration in the sense of like a writing accomplishment. So it's so brilliantly written, and the characters and everything. And also, I was inspired by Gatsby's love for Daisy. Even though it was obsessions, like, Leonardo DiCaprio said the same thing. Like, when he read it as a kid, like a teenager, he's like, I just thought it was like a love story, and that's how I viewed it too. And then he's like, as I got older, and now that I'm playing The Great Gatsby, he's like, I see the more depth and the context of who this guy really is. And so, you know, my perspective changed as I got older, and so did mine. Like, I see more levels to it now.
Mm-hmm. No, I think, like, books are storytelling. You're telling a story. And I think that's something that, since we were born, we were brought up with and stuff, like storytelling. Like, let me tell you what happened. And it's something that I think anyone can understand. Like, that's a language that's kind of universal. And if you want to get a point across, I think that's the way to do it. It's telling a story. Like, I've said it a few times on the podcast too, where it's like, language is very complicated. It's very, very complicated. Back in the old days, like The Little Prince, there's a lot of political ties to many books that are out there. And it's because at that time, you have to be creative in the way you want to get a point across. If it's in terms of talking about a little prince and a guy in charge of a planet who's just all about money, in real life, they could be talking about a prince, you know. So you have to be very creative and savvy with thinking up ways to get a certain opinion out. And I think storytelling is a key to that, where certain people, everyone's literacy level is not the same. Like, my Lexile level or whatever reading level was not up to par, you know, with yours, you know, being an eighth grader reader and stuff. And I think that storytelling, it kind of evens the tone. It evens the tone where it's like we all get this sense of understanding, and you guys all get the point across in the end. Like, every story every story has a moral. Like Frog and Toad, like, that's a childhood story, you know. And every short end of like the last line of the book, there's like a moral to the story. So
No, it's so true that I think books have that really cool universal aspect to it, to where no matter what kind of genre or how lengthy it is, like, oh, it's this 1,000-word book written by like a 50-year-old versus, you know, the 20-page picture book for the third grader. It's like there's something solid and anyone can take away from it. Like the parents reading it with their kids, they're like, oh wait, no, I got that, and then my kid got that. Even though we're both on this different levels of like learning in life, it's like we both took away the same thing at the end of it. And I think that's so awesome. And it kind of reminds me of that like age and stuff. It's like not like it shouldn't define like your intelligence or your integrity. Like my favorite book and also my favorite movie is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, if I said that right. Fun fact, she was only like 16, 17 when she wrote and published that book. And it's one of those books that people read in school and they study on it and like they say, what did it mean, the depths of this character and stuff. And it's like, you know, I think that's such a cool testament to the power of like young people to be like a 17-year-old wrote this book that like your English your 4-year-old English teacher is like having you study. And it's something that like this teenage girl was able to communicate all these complex feelings and emotions and tell this story that adults like pined over, like, oh my gosh, it's so like lush in this you know story and depth of these characters.
Helps you, it's interesting.
And it's like she's just a 17-year-old girl, and I think that's so awesome. And which is why you should always try to cultivate and like push like young people to like focus on their arts and crafts, and like, hey, if you like writing, write every day, read your favorite books, or if you like music, pick up your guitar and practice. Like young people can make really cool things. And you know, she wasn't a college graduate writing the next Pulitzer Prize winner. She was a 17-year-old girl writing about her friends and the things she saw in front of her in the 60s. And so yeah, like there's anyone at any age can make really powerful, impactful things.
And or spread the word on impactful things. What you were saying about writing and stuff, like writing music. I told you earlier this week about I watched a Vice kind of documentary, or short documentary. It was like 30 minutes long, but it was on the song "It Wasn't Me" by Shaggy, and how that song came about. So that one was about, we all know what "It Wasn't Me" was about. It was about cheating. And you deny.
All allegedly.
And so this kind of short documentary was going around how, like, you know, this song almost came out to be. Like, the people wouldn't have heard this song. Like, this wouldn't have been a thing if it hadn't been for certain events that happened. And the documentary unfolds and stuff, and it goes through the steps to how the song was made. And it goes through kind of like a skit, like the writer to the song was really into, and the composer was really into like skits and stuff, and they're like, oh, well, I don't know how to let this happen. You know, like they get into this skit where it's like, dang, you're hooked. You already are hooked in from the beginning. The intro, it could be the title of a story of a book, you know, or the back of a story when you read similar. The back of the book, like, you know how when you read like a synopsis of it, yeah. So like that's equivalent to like the hook of the or the to the intro of the song, the skit, where it's like, I don't know how to let this happen. It's like, whoa, like you're already stepping into a situation where it was like, what do you mean you let what happen? What? Tyler, was it you?
Wasn't me.
So then, and then it gets, and it's going into the art of making the music too, where it's like, then once they're entrapped with that, then the horns hit and the melody starts and stuff. So then it's like you hear the song and the music in the background play and stuff, and then that gets the listener more interested, more hooked onto keep wanting to listen to finish out the song. And then it gets into these very explicit lyrics where the writers purposely were like, we want it to sound like elevator music, but we want it to be explicit. Counter is a counter. It wasn't me. what is it, leaning on the sofa? What do you mean? I even hit her in the shower. She even caught me on camera. Saw the marks on my shoulder. Or was it me?
Like, it's just so catchy, but it's like, it's really explicit.
It's really explicit. And then, so they were basically talking about the end of Shaggy's career, and that was it. And how these like head honchos at the music label didn't really want to release the song out, and they really didn't like it. But once they heard another person kind of okay it, they were like, all right, we have to finish this song because I think it's fire, and if this person thinks it's fire, like the world needs to hear it. So they put on the album. It really didn't make waves, but it's also partly because of the music label. They didn't do a good job at advertising it too for them. They were kind of like, no, Shaggy, you're at your wits. There's no point in making you a big deal or even like raving, like having people rave about you or making noise because you're at the end. So, you know, let's put you aside. You're a has-been, you know. But then this DJ from Honolulu, Hawaii, who had a radio station, he wanted like the hittest music going on, and the music he didn't have. And I think that's a lot of us at times where we want the newest and we want the hippest, and we're like, oh, you haven't heard this song? You don't know who this band is? Let me tell you. Let me show you. You know, I think we can all relate to that. And this DJ person now, he he ripped off the song from Napster, from the illegal downloading site at the time, and he played it on his radio station, and then he said all the lines were basically lighting up, and we're like, dang, like, who's this man, Shaggy? Who's this man? It's Shaggy, man. All right, brother, bye, you know. Hello? Yes, who's this man? Shaggy. All right, thank you, brother. You know, they were up and down the lines and stuff, and so once they heard that, you know, this song was making waves, it kind of, you know, it spread and stuff. But it's just also the spreading the word of a certain story, of a certain type of writing that really impacts something. It's like, imagine if that had never been, if you never downloaded that song from Napster, we would have never heard the beauty of that song. That it's okay to no, it's actually not okay. That's the
It's okay to steal.
because they did mention, they're like, no, we gotta sing something for the ladies in the hook. So the part of the art of the music was also like, the hook of the song is basically about how it's wrong to cheat. Yeah, this song's about cheating, but the moral is it's wrong because of the hook of the line. It's like, it ends with like, completely lost. Like there's a line to that, a verse.
So it's like, oh no, I've learned my lesson. So that way it's like, you have the catchiness of like the male audience, like, oh yeah, it's about this guy doing this crazy stuff. You hear him in detail. And then the girl can appeal, like, it's catchy still, yeah, but like, oh no, he knows
sorry.
it's wrong. He's sorry. So like, they're like, we gotta appeal to both.
But yeah, that's the beauty of writing stories or telling stories. How much time?
Yeah, how long are we recording?
If you count like the 5 minutes for an hour and 15.
Okay.
Good? Alright. That's it for today, guys. Yeah, thanks for watching.
It wasn't me.
See you next week.